Hi everyone, my name's Emanuela,
And I'm Robert.
and we're going to show you how to play Anachrony. Anachrony is a worker placement game set in 26th century New Earth, following the Day of Purgation, during which an unknown, catastrophic explosion shook the planet, exterminating the majority of Earth's population and rendering most of the planet's surface uninhabitable. Survivors organized around four different ideological paths: those of dominance, harmony, progress, and salvation, and after discovering a new resource, neutronium, they found that this resource, combined with energy, is capable of opening wormholes and shows humanity a cataclysmic asteroid impact in our near future, causing another massive explosion and threatening to decimate more of the Earth's surviving population, including those in the vulnerable capital of New Earth.
In this game, each player is going to play as the leader of a path, aiming to prepare their capital for the impact by hiring workers, acquiring breakthroughs in science, constructing buildings and super projects, and eventually evacuating the powerful World Council to their capital after the impact to become the new seat of New Earth's capital. The main concepts of Anachrony are the use of exosuits, worker placement, and time travel. Exosuits are powered up before the action round begins and are used for allowing workers to use the main board by protecting them from the harsh conditions outside of their path's capital. In the action round, players use a tiered worker placement mechanism to take turns playing one action, each by placing a single worker onto their player board or the main board if protected by an exosuit. Your workers are specialists, including scientists, engineers, administrators, and geniuses, each with their own benefits and restrictions. In most cases, a worker that takes an action during this round will be tired at the end of the era. Time travel is a way to gain resources and workers from your future self by using the time rifts opened by the neutronium-rich asteroid. However, meddling too much with time puts you at risk for paradoxes and possibly deadly anomalies that you will need to clear out of your capital or receive negative victory points at the end of the game. On the other hand, the game rewards you by allowing you a head start on preparing for the impact and by providing you with valuable victory points for successfully paying back those resources to your past self.
To teach you how to play this game, we're going to start by going over the general setup, the 6 phases of each round or era, what each part of your player board, path board, and the main board allows you to do, and then showing you a round of Anachrony both before and after the impact. Let's begin. Anachrony is a 1 to 4 player game. To set up, select the appropriate side of the main board based on the number of players. Unless you're playing with 4 players, you'll be using the side with 2 hexagonal slots for each capital action. Place the evacuation tile on the main board with the pre-impact side showing. By the research action slots, place the research dice. Above the board, shuffle and place 5 endgame condition cards used in the base game. This means leaving out the scoring card for the Doomsday module. Place the water drops at the water purifiers and place the resource cubes in the mine. Place the victory point tokens, energy cores, workers, breakthroughs, and shuffled recruit and mine pool cards to the left of the board. On the other side of the board, place the anomaly stack, paradox tokens, paradox die, and shuffled building stacks with the top building tile of each revealed. These are the primary stacks. Place 7 timeline tiles and 1 impact tile below the board. You should have 4 timeline tiles, then the impact tile, which acts only as a marker to indicate rules changes, then the remaining 3 timeline tiles. Next, shuffle and place a super project face down above each timeline tile. Reveal the super project above the first timeline tile. Everyone now chooses which path they would like to play, places their path's focus marker under the first timeline tile, and receives their appropriate board. Next, everyone must agree whether they would like to play the A side, which is the same for everyone, or the B side, which is asymmetrical and designed to reflect the ideology of each path. And on each player board, place the morale and time travel markers onto the starting positions on their tracks. Next, everyone receives their path board with a random side up. At this point, everyone receives their starting resources, water, energy cores, workers, placed accordingly in the awake or tired columns, and anything else indicated on their path boards. The path of progress receives their starting breakthrough at random by rolling both of the research dice. Each player then chooses one of the leader cards available to their chosen path and places it on their path board. Give each player their path banner in a plastic standee. Choose who goes first based on who had the most recent deja vu moment and place their banner on the first player space next to the World Council hex slots. Lastly, going clockwise starting with the first player, give each player 0, 1, 1, and 2 additional water.
Each era has 6 phases. Phase 1 is the preparation phase, where you reveal the super project in the next era, shift the building stacks, and fill the recruit and mine pools with workers and resources. Phase 2 is the paradox phase, where the player or players who have the most warp tiles in each era must roll the paradox die and receive that number of paradox tokens. In most cases, once you have 3 paradox tiles or more, you stop rolling for paradoxes in that round and receive an anomaly. Phase 3 is the power-up phase. Here, you must decide how many actions you plan to take on the main board, place that number of exosuits on your player board, and pay any applicable costs like energy cores. Phase 4 is the warp phase, where players reveal which, if any, assets they are requesting from the future by having everyone reveal at the same time 0 to 2 warp tiles hidden in their hand, and receives those assets. Phase 5 is the action rounds phase, where players take turns taking an action with their workers on their player board or in exosuits on the main board. Phase 6 is the cleanup phase, where everyone retrieves their workers and exosuits, checks for impact and game end, and sets their focus marker to the next era. Before we show a couple of rounds of play, I'm going to go over a lot of the iconography and what you can do on your turn on your player board.
And I'm going to show you what you can do on the main board
during the action rounds phase. On your player board, you have 2 columns for your workers, active and tired. The active workers are ready to use immediately for taking actions. Tired workers need to be woken up by taking the supply action on the player board, which requires you to pay the amount of water indicated under the marker on the morale track, and then moving your morale marker to the right 1 space. If the morale marker is already maxed out to the right, you simply receive the number of indicated victory points. Alternatively, you can use the Force Workers free action to move your workers to the active column, which costs you nothing but requires you to move your morale marker to the left. If the morale marker is already maxed out on the left, you simply lose a worker. Between these 2 columns are 6 hex slots for the exosuits you may power up in Phase 3. The hexes that show this icon indicate that it costs an energy core to power up an exosuit here. This icon indicates that after the impact, this hex slot will be unavailable for powering up an exosuit, effectively decreasing how many total exosuits you can have powered up after the impact. This tells you that for any empty exosuit hex slot during the power-up phase, you receive 1 water. So there is a bit of an incentive to not power up all of your exosuits every era. Up here, you'll see 3 gray triangles and an arrow going to a red triangle. This is where you lay the paradox tokens gained during Phase 2. Once you have filled all of the paradox token slots, you receive an anomaly. You'll see in the buildings area that there are designated rows for each kind of building: power plants, factories, life supports, and labs. In each slot, there is a cost to place a building there. This cost is ignored when placing anomalies or super projects. Power plants allow you to change where your focus marker is, that is, going back in time, up to the number indicated here on each power plant. By changing where your focus marker is, you are able to build past super projects and send back any resources or workers you asked for in past eras, allowing you to move your marker on the time travel track and earn more points. Factories allow you to gain resources without your workers leaving your capital, thus allowing you to save on powering up exosuits. Life supports provide you with water or allow you to pay less water to wake up your workers. And labs have various benefits like making anomalies worth just -1 victory points instead of -3, increasing the range of all of your power plants, or spending water to receive more workers, among other things. In addition to being worth victory points, super projects have various benefits as well. For example, the Exocrawler. As a free action, this allows you to place a powered-up exosuit on the main board and take a standard action, which effectively allows you to do 2 standard actions in 1 turn. On your path board is your evacuation condition, which means this is what you need to achieve in order to be able to take the evacuation action after the impact and receive those victory points. The icons beneath this indicate an additional reward that adds more points to your evacuation total when you take that action. On your leader card is the leader's ability that you can use during the game.
Moving on to the main board, you see hex pools and hex slots. A hex slot can have only 1 exosuit on it at a time, while a hex pool can have an unlimited number of exosuits placed on it. On the upper left are the 3 water purifiers. Here you can receive 3 water as an action. If you use a scientist, you receive 1 extra water. On the bottom left are the nomad settlements. Here you can trade resources as an action. Administrators are able to do 2 trade actions, one after the other. On the right we have the mines, where as an action you can place an exosuit, take the resource cube to the right of that hex, and select a second cube from the left. An engineer taking this action will return to the active column of your player board at the end of this phase. This indicates that after the impact, the top resource cube in this column will always be neutronium. In the center of the board are the capital actions. Going from left to right, we see that you can research, recruit, or construct buildings. To research, as a standard action, you can use a scientist and only a scientist to set 1 die to the face of your choice and roll the other die. The combination of faces is the breakthrough your scientist has made. Here, as a standard action, you can recruit more workers. Both administrators and engineers can recruit workers, but only administrators can recruit geniuses. With each worker, you receive a bonus indicated to its left. If you select a genius, you can have any one of the listed bonuses. The advantages to recruiting a genius are that geniuses receive the benefits of all other specialists and can act as another worker when taking actions. Their only limitations are that they cannot be sent back in time in place of another worker, or paid as another worker, or counted as another worker when tallying up points for taking the evacuation action for your path. Lastly, we have the construct action. Here, as a standard action, you may place an exosuit with a specialist other than an administrator, pay the indicated costs on the building spot on your player board where you're placing your building, or the indicated costs on the right of a super project tile. Above the capital action slots, you have 2 World Council actions. If there is a time that you would like to do a capital action that has no available hex slots left, you can use either of these spots to perform that capital action, applying the appropriate bonus or restriction according to the worker you use. The left World Council action has the added benefit of allowing you to become first player in addition to taking that standard capital action. It is possible for you to use this hex slot even if there are still available hex slots in each of the 3 capital actions, but in this case, you would only take first player. After the impact, this tile gets flipped and reveals an evacuation hex pool, where you can place an exosuit to evacuate people from the World Council to your path's capital and earn points. And under the main board are the timeline tiles, where you move your focus markers in each era and place the warp tiles corresponding to the resources or workers you received from the future. That's just about everything, so let's show you how this works by demonstrating a round or era of Anachrony before the impact and after the impact.
We've set up the game for 2 players on the side with 2 hexes for each capital action. We are both playing side B of our player boards and chose randomly what side of our path board to play. The way we like to do this is we roll the Chronobot die included in the base game, and odd numbers are A and even numbers are B. I have the A side.
And I have the B side.
We have all received our starting resources and placed our workers in the proper columns as specified on our path boards. And I have rolled both research dice to determine my starting breakthrough. For our leader cards, I chose Patron Valerian for his special free action.
And I chose Shepherd Karaticus for his.
Finally, Emanuela is first player, so in clockwise order, she gets 0 water and I get 1 extra water. There is no third player to receive 1 water or fourth player to receive 2.
So now we do phase 1. We shift one building from each building's primary stack into its secondary stack, making sure to reveal the next building in each primary stack as we go, reveal the super project of the next era, and fill the recruit and mine pools as determined by drawing a card for each and placing the workers and resources shown onto their corresponding locations on the main board.
It's the first era, so we skip phase 2, the paradox roll, because there are no warp tiles on the timeline tiles yet.
Phase 3 is the power-up phase, where we decide how many actions we're each going to take on the main board. I'm going to be slightly conservative and go for 5. This means I pay the cost under each of my exosuits on my player board. 2 of my exosuit hex slots show 1 energy core each, and 2 others show 1 resource that is not a neutronium. I'm definitely using the free hex slots for 2 of my exosuits, and I'm going to pay 1 energy core and 2 gold to power up the other 3. This tells me I earn 1 water for each empty exosuit slot. I have 1 empty, so I earn 1 water.
I think I'll aim for 6, and so I also have to pay the cost under each of my exosuits on my player board. My player board shows that for 3 of my exosuits, I can pay either 1 resource other than neutronium, or 1 energy core for each exosuit. I'm going to take the 3 free hex slots and then pay 2 energy cores and 1 gold for the other 3 exosuits I'm powering up. Since I have no empty hex slots, I don't receive additional water.
Phase 4 is the warp phase. Robert and I are going to ask our future selves for 0, 1, or 2 assets, either resources or workers or both, and secretly place the corresponding warp tiles in our hands. I'm ready to reveal.
And I am too.
So 1, 2, 3. Okay, 2 each. I chose an administrator and a neutronium, making sure to pay the cost of 1 water for the administrator because time travel is very tiring.
And I chose a scientist and some uranium. Just like she did, I have to pay 1 water for having the scientist travel through time to help me out.
Now it's phase 5, the action round phase, where we take turns performing an action on the main board or our player board. If we have any free actions which do not count as a standard action and are represented by these circle slots, we can take those free actions before we perform our standard action, never after. My leader, Shepherd Karaticus, provides me with a free action which allows me to take 2 water and add 1 paradox to my player board, or pay 2 water to remove 1 paradox from my player board. I'm going to choose to receive 2 water and 1 paradox. Now that I'm done with my free actions, I can take 1 standard action, so I'm going to send this scientist, protected by an exosuit, to research for me. I'm going to choose the icon of this super project on the icon die, and then I roll the shape die. For this demonstration, we're going to say I rolled a triangle, and I received that breakthrough, and my turn is done.
It's my turn, and I'd like to use this turn to send one of my administrators in an exosuit to recruit a genius. With this genius, I can have any worker bonus that comes with the recruit action. I think it'd be best for me to have 2 more water. And then this icon tells me that every worker recruited here goes to the active column on my player board. Now it's her turn.
On my turn, I'm going to send this engineer to construct this super project, the Rescue Pods. This super project's cost is shown on the right of the tile, so I need to pay 1 energy core, 2 titanium, 3 water, and the matching breakthrough. However, remember that engineers get to construct for 1 less titanium, so the cost for this super project is actually 1 energy core, 1 titanium, 3 water, and the matching breakthrough. This super project must be placed in the leftmost 2 building spots available on my player board. Since all 4 rows are tied for this, it's my choice where to place it. When placing a super project, the building costs on the player board are ignored. Only the costs on the right of the super project tile are paid. And that ends my turn.
I'm going to place this genius on the second construct hex slot, pay the cost of 1 water, and then place this lab in the leftmost building spot in its corresponding row. Here, the cost to place a building is 1 uranium, 2 titanium, and 1 water, but since this genius can act as an engineer, I get a discount of 1 titanium. So I'm instead paying 1 uranium, 1 titanium, and 1 water, which ends my turn.
I'm going to use this administrator to recruit a genius just like Robert did. As with any genius, I can choose whichever bonus I want, and I'll actually take one energy core, and then place the genius in the active column on my player board. And it's back to Robert.
On my turn, I'm going to activate Patron Valerian's free action, which allows me to use an exosuit without placing a worker in it. It works as if a scientist is in it, so I'm going to send this exosuit to research for me. I'm going to set the shape die to the triangle and roll the icon die and receive that breakthrough. Now let's see what Emanuela will do for her turn.
So with the genius I recruited, I'm going to have him construct a power plant. Now, there are no empty hexes available under the construct action, so instead, I'm going to place my genius at one of the 2 World Council hex slots. The left slot would also allow me to take first player, which I already am, in addition to performing the unavailable construct action, but I'm going to choose the right slot. I pay the 1 water to use this hex, select the power plant I want, and place it in the leftmost building spot for its corresponding row. Here, it shows the cost as 1 neutronium, 2 titanium, and 1 water, but since I'm having my genius act as an engineer, I get to apply this titanium discount and place it for 1 neutronium, 1 titanium, and 1 water, and that ends my turn.
Okay, I'm going to send this administrator to trade in the Nomad settlements. He is going to trade this energy core for 1 neutronium. Normally, when a worker is placed here, you can only trade within 1 double arrow, but using this administrator means I get 1 additional trade. So I can trade this energy core for 3 water, then those 3 water for 2 resources of my choice, or the other way around the circle, or do a completely unrelated additional trade around the circle. But I'm going to stick with the 1 neutronium and forfeit my second trade action. Now it's Emanuela's turn.
I have 1 powered up exosuit left, so I'm going to place it at the water purifiers to get 3 water, and since I'm using a scientist, I get an additional water for a total of 4, and now I'm done with my turn.
I'm going to use this scientist to go to the mines, and she's going to pick up for me 2 titanium. Had I used an engineer, he'd remain motivated at the end of this phase. Let's see what Emanuela has left to do.
Well, I have no powered up exosuits remaining, and I can't use a power plant to retrieve a warp tile in the same era, so I pass, and it's back to Robert for his turn.
I'm going to send the scientist to the water purifiers like she did, and take 3 water plus 1 for using a scientist. At this point, it would be Emanuela's turn, but she has already passed, and since I have no buildings for this remaining scientist to use, and no powered up exosuits, I must also pass.
Now we do the cleanup phase. So we retrieve all of our workers and exosuits. If we had any remaining powered up exosuits, they'd be retrieved from our player boards and will have to be powered up again in the next era. We then check if the impact has happened, which it does not, and if the game has ended, which it does not. We now move both of our focus markers to the next era, and I remain first player. At this point, we would repeat phases 1 through 6 for the second era, but we're going to stop here for this demonstration and move to how the game plays after the impact.
Here we are after the asteroid has hit. There are some rules changes to keep in mind. For example, the neutronium-rich asteroid has brought plenty of powerful neutronium to Earth, so now the topmost cube of the mining action is always going to be neutronium, shown by these icons. Additionally, you'll notice the world capital is in a very damaged state. People will need to be evacuated to our path's capital by taking this evacuation action in this hex pool, which is an action that can be taken by any worker. Lastly, on the main board, we have shuffled and placed 2 collapsing capital action hex tiles that make these actions much stronger, but after we use these hex tiles, they get flipped to the hex unavailable side as the capital continues to crumble because of the impact.
On our player boards, we have these icons that tell us these hex slots are now unavailable to us for the remainder of the game. And that's it. Let's begin our first round in the post-impact eras, as usual, with Phase 1.
We shift the building stacks, refill the recruit and mine pools, and reveal the next super project, which we've already done.
In Phase 2, we roll for paradoxes, as we would have also done in eras 2, 3, and 4 before the impact. First, we have to determine how many rolls each player has to make. Robert and I are tied for most warp tiles in eras 2 and 3, and I have the most in era 4. So I have to make 3 rolls, and Robert has to make 2. We'll start with me. I have one paradox tile from earlier in the game, so let's say I roll a 1 on my first roll, then 2 on my second roll. Now, at this point, I have 4 paradoxes. On my player board, once I have 3, I receive an anomaly. So first, I discard all of my paradox tiles. Second, stop rolling for paradoxes, even though I have 1 roll left. Third, can choose to retrieve a warp tile from any timeline tile and return it to my supply once everyone is done rolling for paradoxes, and this icon means I do not get to advance my time travel marker. And lastly, I would place this anomaly tile on the leftmost available building spot, choosing which row myself if there was a tie. However, on the B side of the Path of Salvation's board, it shows here that I can place an anomaly in whichever building spot I wish, so I'm going to place it here in the 3rd building spot of the Factories row. And as I have already mentioned, even though I still have 1 roll left for paradoxes, I stop once I have an anomaly. Now it's Robert's turn to roll for paradoxes.
Okay, so I have 1 paradox tile from earlier too. Before I roll, I want to point out that on my player board, I can have 4 paradox tiles before I receive an anomaly. However, because of this lab that I built in the first era, I can now have 5 paradox tiles on my board before an anomaly is earned. So I'm going to take my 2 rolls, and we'll say I received 1 paradox for each roll.
And now that all the paradox rolls have been resolved for all players, I get to remove a warp tile of my choice from any timeline tile because of this anomaly, and this is shown here on the left that this is an immediate benefit. So I'm going to choose to remove this warp tile from Era 2, and now it's the end of Phase 2.
It's Phase 3, so we power up exosuits as usual, and this time we're both limited to 4 hex slots. I will power up 3, pay 1 gold, 1 uranium, and receive 1 water.
And I'll power up 2 at no cost and receive 2 water. It's now Phase 4, where we secretly decide how many assets we want to warp in this era. So, 1, 2, 3, 2 for me,
and 1 for me.
I get a neutronium and powered up exosuit,
and I get a powered up exosuit.
It's Phase 5, and I'm still first player. I think I'm going to use Shepherd Karaticus's free action again to receive 2 water and 1 paradox. For my standard action, I'm going to place a genius in an exosuit on the hex pool space and take the evacuation action. At this point, I receive points for my evacuation condition and my secondary goal. Even though I don't have 2 anomalies on my building spots, I still receive these 6 points because of my Rescue Pods super project. Then I get 2 victory points for every free warp tile, which means not on the timeline tiles, and uranium cube pair. I have 3 warp tiles in my supply and 4 uranium cubes, so that's 3 pairs, earning me another 6 victory points. It's Robert's turn.
What I'm going to do first is wake up my workers. Unfortunately, I don't have enough water to do that, so I'm going to have to use the Force Workers free action. When I activate this, I move all of my workers in the tired column to the active column, and then move the morale track marker to the left 1 space. As you can see, the further to the left this marker goes, the cheaper it is to supply your workers and wake them up, so you hopefully won't earn negative victory points at the end of the game. Now, I'm going to use this engineer to take a construct action on this bottom hex tile, always ignoring the cost underneath. This lets me pay 1 less non-neutronium resource when constructing, and since I also get a discount of 1 titanium for using an engineer, I'm actually going to build this power plant for just 1 neutronium, 1 gold, and 2 water shown on the building spot here, and my turn is done.
On my turn, I'm going to wake up my workers. Fortunately, I have this life support that lets me supply my workers with half as much water. My current morale track space has 7 water written below it, so I get to pay half, rounded up, so 4 water to wake up all of my workers using this administrator. At this point, I would move my morale track marker to the right 1 space, but since I'm already on the rightmost space, I simply earn 2 victory points. That's the end of my turn.
I'm also going to take the evacuation action, but with an administrator. I receive 5 victory points plus 2 more for each breakthrough scientist pair. I have 5 breakthroughs and 4 scientists. Geniuses do not count. So I earn another 8 victory points, and because I'm the last player to evacuate, I take this -3 victory points token.
Now that it's my turn again, I am going to use one of my scientists to do a research action and select this bottom hex tile, ignoring the cost underneath and getting to research twice as a bonus. So I'm going to set the shape die and roll the icon die and receive that breakthrough. And for my second research action, I'm setting the shape die again and rolling the icon die. It's Robert's turn.
For my standard action, I'm going to send an administrator to this bottom hex to recruit a genius, and I'll take 1 victory point for my bonus. This tile also allows me to move my morale track marker to the right 1 space, which puts me back on the rightmost space. This ends my turn.
I'm going to use this last powered up exosuit to build one more power plant. I'm going to use an engineer on this top hex tile and build this power plant for 1 less neutronium and 1 less titanium because I'm using an engineer. So in the power plant's corresponding row, I'm going to pay 1 neutronium, 1 titanium, and 2 water. Notice that this power plant has the same warp tile icon as the one on the anomaly I earned. This means that, just like with the anomaly, I have the option of returning a warp tile from any timeline tile back to my supply. In this case, I'm not going to use this opportunity and say this is the end of my turn.
I'm going to activate this free action on one of my life supports to take 2 water. And with my last powered up exosuit, I will get some water from the water purifiers with a scientist, taking 3 water plus 1 from the supply for a total of 6 water this turn. It's now Manuela's turn.
I need to take care of this anomaly, so I'm going to place one of my engineers on this worker slot, pay 2 water and either 1 neutronium or 2 other resources. In this case, I'm going to pay 2 uranium and 2 water. This icon underneath tells me that I now get to remove this anomaly, and my worker is returned to the worker supply. This ends my turn.
On my turn, for the purposes of demonstrating Power Plant 113, I'm going to place a scientist on it and pay non-neutronium resources to set the range of the power plant. This can be no greater than the distance to the era you will be placing your focus marker on. Here, this means 3 because that's where my oldest warp tile that I want to remove is. So I'm going to spend 3 titanium to return 1 uranium to the supply and remove this warp tile. Do note that this can be any combination of non-neutronium resources and does not have to be 3 that match. For successfully paying back this warp tile with time travel, I get to move my time travel marker to the right 1 space, in addition to earning victory points equal to the number of resources I use to activate this power plant, so that would be 3 victory points.
On my turn, I'm going to use this power plant to send back some assets. This tells me that I can move my focus back up to 3 eras not just once, but twice. This does not mean I can go back in time to 3 eras ago, then another 3 eras. It's not additive. Anyway, I'm going to place a scientist here and pay the 1 water cost, then move my worker to the 3rd era. Here, I can immediately pay 1 uranium and remove this warp tile, and then advance my time travel marker to the right 1 space. But this power plant lets me do this time travel action twice, so again from the current era, I can go back up to 3 eras. I'm going to set my focus to the 4th era and pay back this neutronium and remove the warp tile from the timeline tile. And again, I move my time travel marker to the right 1 space. This ends my turn.
My last standard action of this phase is going to be paying back another asset. This time, I'm going to place a genius on this power plant, pay 1 water, move my focus back to the 4th era, pay back this scientist, remove this warp tile, and move my time travel marker to the right 1 space. It's important to remember that when paying back workers, you cannot send back a genius as that worker. Geniuses can act as other workers, but they are still geniuses. You also cannot send back a worker from the tired column. Workers warp in motivated, so they must be sent back motivated. And that is the end of my turn.
I will also be performing my last standard action in this phase, which will be to pay back 1 more asset. I'm going to activate this power plant with a genius, set my focus marker to the 4th era, pay back this scientist from my active column, and move my time travel marker to the right 1 space. So in this era alone, I've paid back 3 assets and increased my score by 8 victory points just by using the time travel concept. Anyway, it's back to Robert for his turn.
At this point, since there is nothing more that I want to do, I'm going to pass for the rest of this phase.
And I am passing too. Now it's time for the cleanup phase. We retrieve all of our workers and exosuits. Workers used during the round go to the tired column as usual unless otherwise indicated.
Here is an example of where it's different. On my player board, scientists used on power plants, factories, and labs remain motivated. So this scientist and this genius both remain motivated and come back to the active column. Do remember that geniuses always receive every worker's benefits regardless of whether or not they are used as that worker type during the action phase.
After we retrieve workers, we check for impact, which did happen, so those 4 collapsing capital action hex tiles that we used this round must be flipped to the hex unavailable side. And lastly, we check for game end, which occurs either when all of the collapsing capital action tiles have been flipped to their hex unavailable side, or when it's the end of the 7th era. Since neither of these is currently the case, we move our focus markers to the next era and move on to the next round.
At this point, though, let's say it's the end of the game, just the way everything is right now. First, we get to untangle the continuum. This means we have one last chance to send back the assets we received in the past, without moving the time travel marker, since we're not using power plants in focus here. So I still have a neutronium, engineer, and powered up exosuit on the board. I have none of those assets, so unfortunately I can't send those back.
And I still have a titanium, gold, and a powered up exosuit to pay back. I do have 1 gold, so I'm going to pay this back, remove the warp tile, and leave my time travel marker where it is. Unfortunately, I have no powered up exosuits or titanium. It's important to remember that exosuits do need to be powered up in order to pay them back and retrieve that warp tile. And remember that to pay back any remaining workers, they have to come from the active column and cannot be geniuses.
Now, we're going to show you how in-game scoring works. Each player's final score consists of the total victory points from their buildings, super projects, anomalies, which are worth -3 each unless you have a modifier like Lab 406, where your time travel marker is, where your morale track marker is, breakthroughs, where each breakthrough is worth 1 victory point, but every set of shapes is worth an additional 2 victory points, so I get 5 victory points plus 2 victory points, and she gets 6 victory points plus 4. Victory point tokens, warp tiles remaining on the timeline tiles, which count as -2 victory points each. In this case, I get -6 and she gets -4. And finally, the victory points for the endgame condition scoring cards you've earned. In this case, I have the most buildings, which does not include super projects, and we tie for morale. Whenever there is a tie, the full score is earned by each player. Manuela wins for total time travel ranges because she has 2 plus 3 plus 3, and I have 4 plus 1 because a range of X is counted as 1. Manuela also wins the in-game condition scoring cards for the most breakthroughs and the most successful time travels. This puts our scores at 56 for me and 63 for her, so the path of salvation is the new seat of the World Council.
If we were tied, the tie is broken by whoever has the most water, in this case Robert. And if we were still tied, whoever has the most total resources wins. And if even that tie couldn't be broken, we both would win and the new seat of the World Council would simply rotate between us.
And that's how you play Anachrony. Please keep in mind that this is meant for instructional purposes and we were not necessarily demonstrating optimal turns. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you would like us to do tutorials for the Chronobot one-player game or other modules, like the Doomsday module, the Pioneers of New Earth module, or the Guardians of the Council module, please like this video and place your vote in the comments for which one you'd like to see done first. If you have questions about any specific rules in Anachrony, please post them in the Anachrony Rules Forum on BoardGameGeek, where many knowledgeable and friendly players will be happy to help you. Be sure to search the forum first, as it is likely that question may have been asked before and answered by other users or one of the game designers.
Anachrony was designed by David Turci, Victor Peter, and Richard Daman, and is published by Mindclash Games. You can find the story of Anachrony at anachronyboardgame.com, as well as a designer diary on this game's Kickstarter page. Links are posted in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and happy gaming!